And thank you for having me today. We're just going to move over here. This is actually very exciting for me, having grown up here in Walworth County, and then venturing east, and as my mother said, it's taking a really long time to come back home. Okay, Derek. I've had these kinds of issues all over the world.
That's great.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you were sort of falling asleep, we woke you up. And it's a good thing because we're going to talk about data. So, just a little bit about, I think, why I'm here today. Derek talked to you about my long career at Nielsen, which is a company I joined right out of college in a management training program as an economics major. I grew up in Lake Geneva. My mom's family has been here for 6 generations. I went to college in Ohio. I studied economics, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I thought I want to do something that uses that and travel and work with interesting people. And I swear those were my goals. But I also knew I wanted to learn more about business, and I needed to do that in a way that didn't involve immediately going to business school. So I went looking for companies that had management training programs, and I found an ad for Nielsen, this is true, and wrote them a letter, and they didn't have a management training program, and they then wrote me back and said, "We're starting one. Are you interested?" And I ended up being the first woman hired into their newly developed program to teach people right out of college about the business of measuring television, which was a big part of Nielsen's work. And the Nielsen company has a real connection to Wisconsin in that the founder went to University of Wisconsin, was an engineer. There's a Nielsen Tennis Center at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, lots of other buildings like that around Chicago. And it was still a family-owned company when I joined it in 14 countries. I joined in Chicago, went through a year-long period of learning everything about how we made TV ratings, and then they sent me to New York. And I said, I'll go for 2 or 3 years, and I'll come back to Chicago. And 30 years later, I did come back to Chicago. But what happened in the interim was a really great experience in building a company that plays a very large role in many, many businesses who either produce television programming, content, advertising, or buy advertising for their companies in order to reach consumers. That's part of the business. The other part of the company's business, at least at that time, was measuring what consumers buy, consumer packaged goods all over the world. And when I left, we were actually doing that in 106 countries. So a very global business. So if you were any food manufacturer, there are many in Wisconsin, you're probably a Nielsen client, Coca-Cola, Unilever, you name it. And every major network, and now every streaming company and everybody else are also clients of the company. But what I learned in the interim was how we measured what people watched at that point, listened to now, watch on your phone, your computer, or whatever now, or what you bought. And we did that in a way that made all the information we gathered from people who were representative of populations in different countries. And we had to convince people to give us the information, gather it in many ways, put it together, and then make it useful. Today you think about big data, and I think we were big data before that term was ever used. Have some of the first commercial computers that were used, because we would collect information from individuals, real people, who had to represent our population in order to have fair information. And so in that work, particularly in television, we actually measured local market television in over 200 markets every year, 4 times a year at least, in many major markets every single day, minute by minute. And we produced data overnight for TV stations, broadcast networks, cable networks, everybody else eventually, that would help them understand who their audience was. And it's one thing to collect information for people, it's another thing to have it be representative and be true. And so the whole idea of samples and working with statisticians to make sure we were representing the whole population became a very essential part of the work, which is where I learned a lot about consumer behavior and working with sociologists to convince people to participate in the work. That is not easy. It is a very special task to get cooperation from people who you're asking to keep equipment in their home so that you can tell what they're watching on TV, and then have them not talk about that to anybody else because you don't want that behavior influence. So a couple big things that came out of that were some ideas that work today. In fact, the Nielsen Company invented the term market share. And the whole idea, about marketing is, what your business or product or whatever does compared to your competitors. And it was a really simple idea, and then they were measuring your sales, but that didn't help you very much if you didn't know how your competitor was doing. And so you had to analyze that, look at the whole market, and look at your own position. And a lot of companies, even today, can do a really good job of understanding their own consumers. But what they can't do on their own is understand the whole market and know how it's moving. You could be growing, but your competitor could be growing twice as fast, and you need to understand that. So a lot of the value of Nielsen was understanding the market and having a representative view of what everybody was doing, not just you and your individual business. And that's why it became such a strong company across 106 countries. The family actually sold the company, and it became a publicly traded company owned by many others. It's almost 100 years old with the name Nielsen on it, and the company sold it in the 1980s. So as a brand, it's pretty strong. But that's where I learned a lot about the value of representation and why it mattered, and the science behind it, and processing large amounts of data, and all of those things which led to a really interesting job, and a couple of things that I'll tell you that I never anticipated, going to Badger High School and doing my math, like quite large confrontations with people who ran major broadcast networks when they didn't like the answers we gave them about their ratings. And there are a lot of personalities and egos, and you're measuring people's performance. So a lot of interesting development in a career to get to a point where you're running a company with tens of thousands of employees around the world, but great opportunities to travel, to learn how similar people are in different places, and yet how cultures can be so different. And a lot of that has shaped my view of the kind of work I then have taken on since then, which is when I left, having gone in as an entry-level management development associate, and ending up running the media business and then becoming the vice chair of the whole company. I'd been there for 35 years, and I said, that's enough. I had 2 young kids. I wanted to come back and had moved back to Chicago, but was traveling all over the world. And this leads us back to the Lake Geneva part. My family has always been here, and I built a house here 20 years ago, knowing I would come back. And so we are here now, full time. But in that career, when I decided to retire from that job, I wanted to stay in business, and I wanted to do things that were really different, and yet use a lot of that experience in understanding people. And we talk about consumers, and we talk about clients, and we talk about stakeholders, but everyone, in every case, it's people. And so understanding people's behavior and how when new choices are presented to them, or digital technology goes from an analog 12 channels to hundreds of channels, what changes and what doesn't change, to me were really interesting things. You could say that's really geeky and actually was described as very nerdy in a New York Times article, but that's okay. But I've always been curious about why and what would happen. And so things like, you have hundreds and hundreds of channels available to you right now. When we went from 12 to 300 or 400, in fact, people only watched the same number, no matter how many you had available. It was not the expected answer. So those are the kinds of fun things you can find in data that everybody can relate to. But it relates to what you all do every day also. There's information you learn, there are assumptions you might make, and it takes information and data and research and representative research to know if that's actually really the answer. And that's what I think keeps that whole field very interesting. But when I left, I decided to join the board of Alliant Energy, a company you probably all know, but also Kemper Insurance and Hyde Park Angels, which is the Midwest's largest angel investment group in Chicago, and a small options exchange in Chicago called Box. Really different, having nothing to do at all with television or media, for the reason that they have nothing to do with television and the media. And I wanted to use, particularly in the Midwest, to come home and actually help find ways to make sure the economy here was strong. Because I left after graduating from college because I couldn't find the right job here. And there was not that same opportunity. I think what's so incredible is what I see now in Walworth County and in the surrounding areas and in commutable distance and those opportunities. And now living here full time, seeing Wisconsin's development through the eyes of Alliant as well, and a lot of the other work we do, it's very exciting. And I think given what's happened in the last couple years, the last year and a half to all of us, and I was one of those moms at home trying to get 2 kids to go to school online with an elderly mother who had broken her hip and couldn't be in rehab with caregivers and working and everything else. So I understand quite well how stressful the situation has been on so many of us. But I also saw the opportunity of being here in Walworth County. And I saw what COVID has done through my board work. I sit on a university board. We had students, on a campus, in a residential campus in Ohio. Through my work, I saw many different things going on. And understanding consumers and understanding trends and research, my brain was looking for the big things that we were going to come out of this with. And so what I thought I would do for a couple of minutes is save you looking for those big trends we're projecting for the next couple of years. I went to an article that a friend of mine who is a strategist, his name is Rashad Tabakawala, and he was the head of strategy for Publicis, which is the world's largest ad agency. And he has a set of sort of forces that he's determined in looking at the next 10 years and then some trends. There's a short Wall Street Journal piece and a little bit from Nielsen. And so I'm going to go through what looks like it's coming toward us and then talk a little bit about Wisconsin and Walworth County and see if we can bring it home. So with that, so in the next decade, Rashad suggests that there'll be 4 big forces and 10 predictions. And I'm not going to go into each of these in great detail, just a couple. One of them is we'll have multipolar globalization. It won't just be the US and Western Europe versus China. It will be India, Africa, the US, Western Europe, and more places to pay attention to. The next one is 3 big demographic shifts. The first one, declining population, here particularly, aging population. In the US, there are 10,000 people who turn 65 every day, and most of the money is in the 50 plus part of the population, which many of you may know in this room, but I found startling. There is a difference in the ethnic makeup and mindset of that changing population. In another year, the US will be multi-ethnic majority and everyone under 18 in 1 year. But 50 plus, 50 years old and older, is mainly Caucasian, setting up certainly different perspectives and different thinking. And if you pause and think about that for a moment, it probably explains a lot of things that you're seeing and reading and thinking about and expectations. Another big force, we're in the third connected age where data is connected to data, and it's connected in new ways. It's faster, like 5G, and it's very powerful in the cloud. So it's a very different time for the importance of information and data. And the next big one would be, not a surprise, COVID-19 shock. You know, the fact that everyone in the world has gone through financial, health, and social crises at the same time is really, really obviously unusual, and in our lifetimes unusual. But it also has deep reverberations. I think some very positive trends will come out of this, and there are others that we don't even know what will happen yet. And so then he makes 10 predictions. I'm going to run through them pretty quickly, but spend time on several that seem to fit with all the materials I've seen on the tables. First is there'll be new models of governance and the way we think about our government and what it's been focused on as the work changes. Secondly, and this is no surprise to any of you, a workplace revolution and the great quote-unquote resignation. Every single meeting I'm in, board meeting, and it is not-for-profit organizations and for-profit, large publicly traded companies and small ones, everyone is dealing with people leaving for all different kinds of reasons and record turnover. So I have to stand back sometimes and I say, well, where's everyone going if they're leaving? That's the big question, and that is the question. They're going for all different reasons in different directions. But as a result of that, managing turnover and managing your relationship with all the people who work for you, as you all know well, is very difficult. And it requires engaging people and understanding, why they're working, what they want, and everything else. There's been a particular loss of women in the workforce, and a lot of the gains that have been made have been erased. So what does returning to the office mean? I think also that's a discussion I've heard everywhere, not maybe the plant, maybe the school, it doesn't have to be the office. What does it look like? What does it mean? And everybody is trying different things. A key here is to understand what people want in addition to what you want in running the organization. And this is where research can come in. In one of the better descriptions of the way I think companies are managing this is, the better companies are managing this is, you have an approach for right now. You decide based on what you need and what your employees are telling you to set up a structure, say, between now and March. And you say, and then we'll reevaluate it. It's like software releases. It's not done. It's going to have to keep being revised, and that's really difficult to manage, but I think that is exactly what most people will have to do, because thinking about the old way of working where everybody's together all the time, depending on the kind of work you do, is probably not the future. People are going to work very differently for lots of reasons. If you think about this, careers can last 50 years with life expectancy and everything else, but companies usually last, on average, 15. So there has to be a lot of change, which has implications for education and everything else. But this topic is so important and requires a lot more thinking, and this is a place where I think WCEDA and schools and universities and others can make a big difference in helping each other learn what people want and what you need. The auto industry, big changes over the next 10 years, reinventing mobility, integrating tech, mobility, energy, and safety. It actually if you think about where automobiles are going, with all of that happening in a car, it really would be the metaverse. We know electric vehicles are down the road, so that's a big change, and the whole consumer experience of buying and servicing, an automobile will be different. Trust is more and more important. Consumers want to know they can trust the brand. Creativity and creators. There's a huge increase in the number of people registering to start new businesses. It's the largest, I think it's 450,000 a month in 2021, more than we've ever seen in history. They won't all make it, but it certainly tells us that if we have the ecosystem and the support, a lot of people are going in that direction. So that's his list. The Wall Street Journal top consumer trends, this is short, but one big one that I think everybody here should feel good about is that open air and outside space is very valuable. And that seems so obvious, but it's the top of their list. So think about the implications of that for here. Brand activism, good organizations doing good things. People expect that from companies and organizations now. I like to think that's a very old-fashioned idea that's coming back and actually is so much about being part of a community and what you do. Expressing the purpose of your work is an expectation for a younger generation that they will work somewhere where the purpose aligns with their beliefs. But it's not just them anymore, it's everybody. Something called phygital reality, which is the physical space and the digital together, merging those worlds. Think of stores and online, think of meetings and work. Expecting businesses to offer more flexibility to their customers, the hours they're open, the services they have, the way they provide, the delivery, which obviously has implications for your employees as well. And I chose one example from my old employer, Nielsen. Their top global consumer trend for 2021 is actually about well-being and the intersection of health, wellness, and well-being. So it's not just your medical health, and it's not just your mental health. It's all of the things around that, and consumers expecting offerings that will help them, not surprisingly in this pandemic we're in, help them in all those ways. And they expect clean, simple, and sustainable goods. And last but not least is a short list from McKinsey. And you will see themes here. I did this on purpose because it's not just one list. For McKinsey, the consulting firm, it was home nesting. It was the disruption of consumer loyalty in shopping and how younger consumers are nowhere near as loyal as older ones are. But it's not just about shopping, it's about any service or anything they're purchasing. Leisure travel is increasing. I think you probably know that, and that's important to us here. But business travel is very slowly coming back and will never go back to the levels, really, of 2019. I've seen that in the airports. I don't think any organization I know expects to go back to the business travel at the levels they were doing it. I talked about the record number of startups. And we have a very vibrant environment here in Wisconsin for that, in venture and in innovation. And last but not least, companies and organizations are going to have to look at this whole pandemic and how it's changed shopping behavior if you're a consumer and buy, but also any service you're providing. Because the combination of the virtual and electronic and digital commerce or telehealth or teleeducation, in addition to bricks and mortar, connecting all of that, making that work, making the supply chain and logistics and marketing connections is complicated. And most organizations, I don't care what they're doing, don't feel prepared for this. It could be a museum, it could be a school, it could be a manufacturer. There's a lot of opportunity in jobs, but there's also a lot of work to do to pull that all together. I mentioned telemedicine, it's booming. That's a good thing, I think, for us here. It's complicated from a regulatory point of view, and there are Mercy people here who know much more about this than I do. But just as a consumer, we know it. People are now willing to be on a screen and receiving care, and that changed very quickly. And there's a willingness to provide that way, and that means a lot more accessibility for people, for both mental and medical health. That's a good thing. But it also means consumers, all of us people, have to have access to technology for that to work. And that means broadband, that means computers, that means skill. That is not the case for a very large part of the population. They don't have broadband access because it doesn't go where they are. And that is a big part of what a lot of companies, not only is it in part of the recently, I think passed, but I'm not sure signed, infrastructure bill, but also companies like Alliant and others are working on that, because having broadband access in Wisconsin in all areas is a very big economic development issue. But it's also a fairness issue and an equity issue. So something to pay attention to. And so what does that all mean for us? For us here? There's some big themes there. I don't think anything should be a huge surprise. But coming from different areas, I see, and I did a fair amount of research on this for this, but you all know the strengths of being in Wisconsin as a state, the location and connection to transportation, our education system, the industries we have, the weather resilience, the economic factors and tax incentives, the entrepreneurial support. But what wasn't on the list that I saw, but I feel, going back to that open air part, is the natural resources, beauty, and water. I think this is a very big deal now, and I think we should be talking a lot more about it. Walworth County has all of those things, the location, the transportation, the close to larger areas, which has implications for who you hire. They can work in multiple places in the same family. Industry and beautiful outdoors, education at all levels and all types, a very strong sense of community, interesting activities, growing healthcare support, I think really, really strong, attractive things. I don't think enough people know, and a big part of what you're doing is talking to other companies and things like that. But I don't think people, residents, part-time residents, actually know very much about the community. And so I'm going to give you 6 ideas to take away. One of them relates to that. The first one, not surprising given what I've just been talking about, is know your customer. In light of these changing trends, the age things I talked about, where the money is, the movement, what might you do differently, and what might you need to research to understand the positioning of whatever it is you're doing. Second, how can you meet the flexibility needs of your current or your future employees? How can you think about work where there are people who want to work but need flexibility, and there are people who need employees and have to think about that differently? It sounds like everybody's doing a lot of that already, but thinking very creatively about interns, students, semi-retired people, everything else, and thinking about regular part-time roles and other things are one way of looking at the workforce of the future. I'm a big believer in quick surveys. I see there's one on your table. But SurveyMonkey is a pretty easy online tool you can use. And doing quick 2 and 3 question surveys to get a pulse of the people who work for you. And if they don't have access to that, you do it on paper. And do that regularly and report back to the people you ask what you actually got as an answer so they know you're paying attention. Pretty obvious, but doesn't always happen. But it's a very fast way of getting a sense of whether you have a problem. And I think we've learned in the pandemic, we can hire people in many places, We can hire people at different levels. And so that's something that we found to be helpful in a lot of other situations I'm in. Talking about the advantages of Walworth County to people who live here, because I grew up here, but I also have lived in New York for 30 years and in Chicago. I've traveled all over the world. I have a lot of friends who don't live full-time in this area but are here part-time, and you'd be amazed at how little they actually know about Walworth County and just basic things, because in fact, not because they're bad people and not because they couldn't learn, they're coming in, they're going to their house, they're leaving. And understanding the opportunities here is a big missed opportunity, because these are a lot of people who actually run companies who might move full-time if they understood the incredible education we have. And I decided to bring my children back to Badger High School, my twins, when they were in 8th grade in Chicago, and go back where I went to school. I researched it very carefully. We have an excellent competitive education system. We have a lot of advantages. I don't think we've thought about the broad grassroots approach to talking about the positives here, and I suggest we do that. Fourth, think digital and broadband and access to all. That issue about broadband, if there's anything you can do to influence it, it makes a big difference, and it will in our development. Fifth, highlight the purpose of your work to everybody who works for you. It matters to your clients. It matters to your employees. It matters to the people you're going to hire in the future. It used to be considered, honestly, kind of soft, something you didn't need to do. You need to do it. It's a critical part of how people are thinking about work and what they do every day, and how they go home and talk about how they're spending their work hours. So if you're not doing it, it's a suggestion. And I'll leave it at the end with, think forward and around the corner. Read everything you can, watch what you can, listen to podcasts, use every resource, the schools, the organizations like this, whatever you can to keep focused on what's changing, because we don't know all the impacts from this pandemic and all the change right now, but we will be able to learn and be able to adapt. And I think we're in a very special part of the United States and a really special part of Wisconsin. I think the opportunities here are great. And it's a personal and professional goal for me that more people do understand that. So I'm going to end there, and thank you for letting me come today and share some of my experience. Thank you.
And it wasn't a joke, but David Brettel before used to mention that, I forced myself on this group, and he would joke around, and I know we all miss his jokes, but I kept saying to him that I was going to establish an award in his name, and I don't think he thought I was serious, but in all seriousness, we did that not just as a joke, but really because of the work that he did. And I know that a lot of you in the room know him and worked with him over many years, but he, really was an inspiration to so many different agencies in the county and within the county itself, and did such really great work through his tenure there. That we thought it would be a great thing to honor him and really just shine a light on other individuals that are doing great work. And so, as you can see, and I know it was in the program, our award this year for the community betterment is going to The Time Is Now. Unfortunately, the founder of this organization, Sal DiMaselli, was unable to be with us today in person for some health reasons related to his wife. But he did provide us a short, I think, 4-minute clip that I would like to play for you right now. So if you could run that clip.
Hello, my name is Sal. So
So what we will do is I'll work out a time and we have a plaque for him. And then there's also a check that is courtesy of Dave Brettel too that we will get to him when the time is right. But certainly deserving. Probably a lot of you read his column, but he has a regular column in the Lake Geneva News, regional news. And his stories are sometimes chilling, but always moving. And so we're happy to be able to award and give him that recognition this year. Our, sorry, I got ahead of myself here. Our next award, so we offered 2 awards this year, and the second award was for we called it the Walworth County Company Culture Award. And I think just listening to Susan, you talk about culture and how important that is, and people and purpose. I think that's one reason why we wanted to kind of highlight that and just recognize what they're doing. If people have much experience with Kikkoman, they're very modest, very humble company. Everyone that works for them. They don't necessarily do anything for recognition. I think it was even hard for them today. They, debated coming, but they've, just because of being in the food industry, they've still had a policy where they try to avoid larger events. So I do have a statement that I'll read, but before that, I would like to just read a couple of notes that I put together in preparation for that. A second here. Mixed up. Because I did have a conversation with a person who has been there for about 26 years at Kikkoman, and I was just asking her. I said, "Yeah, I've heard that they have high retention. People work there a long time." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm 26 years, but we're honoring somebody next week for 43 years." And said, we have a lot of instances of people working here for a long time. And so then I asked her, I said, "Well, what is it? Is it the pay? Is it the benefits? What's certain programs and things like that?" And she said, "Well, they aren't generous in that way." But she said, "It's really more about creating a family environment." And I said, "Well, I know a lot of businesses try to do that." She said, "Well, a lot of businesses say that, and maybe they try it." But she said, "I've worked for a number of other, similar type businesses, not exactly the same, but larger business that just isn't the same." And so I asked her, I said, "Well, just tell me a little bit more." And so just a few quick things that she mentioned, I think gets her point across. And she said, I think it was the first year or two that she was there. She had started out in shipping. She was a shipping clerk, manager. And she said the president, who typically is at the facility there and walks around and stuff, asked her, he said, "Could you come to my office?" And she said, "Oh, what's wrong?" And so she gets in the office and she said, "Did I do something wrong or whatever?" And he said, "Well, I noticed that you had a lot of phone calls today, and I just wanted to find out, is there something wrong?" And she said, "Well, yeah, actually, my father was admitted in the hospital. He's got a bad heart, and we're not sure, how bad it is or whatever." And he's like, "Well, then why are you here? You need to get to your father." She said, "Well, I need to ship this out." And she said, "I couldn't even pronounce where it was going. I didn't know the name." And he said, "Don't worry about it. We'll get it done. If it doesn't go today, it'll go tomorrow or the next day." And so she said that was kind of the first thing that got her attention. And then, a couple more things happened where, she would just see other employees helping one another with different things that came up. It might have been a tragedy. I know in one instance she said I can't remember which department it was, but the father got killed in a car accident. She said the whole department rallied around that person, came to visit and brought food and, really just kept checking in with to see what they were like. And she said it's just throughout the little kind of monitor, because they have, I think, close to 400 employees, but, it's hard to keep track of everybody, but they monitor their Facebook pages and social media, and people just look out for one another. And so then she said the other thing is they were really interested in my personal development and my career advancement. And she said, unfortunately, my family was large. We didn't have enough money for all of us to go to college. I didn't go to college. Didn't really think I had much opportunity at this company, but they kept pushing me to get more training, more education, and advance in my career. And they believed in me more than I did, and really gave me the confidence to the point where she has definitely a very good management position now. So, and then lastly, she said, anytime I want, or anybody wants, no matter if they're on the floor or doesn't matter what their level of employment is, I can go, we know we can go right into the president's office, sit down and talk to them and tell them anything, and we know that that's going to be okay, and that they're going to try to help us if they can. So I just wanted to share that because it's a little bit different. I know we talk about different programs and things like that people can put into play, but I think with them it's really just something, and she said, yeah, maybe it's partly because of the Japanese culture that has, been transferred to this facility. But, they marked their 100-year anniversary, I think, in 2017 for the company overall. And I think their 50-year mark in Walworth is coming up next year, but it's pretty close. So anyways, just wanted to just mention that, and then I do have a brief statement to read from Dan Miller, who was on our board. Maybe some of you would remember him, but he's their Vice President for Administration. So Dan says, on behalf of the employees of Kikkoman Foods, Inc., it is our honor to accept WCEDA's Walworth County Culture and Culture Award. Unfortunately, our management team could not be in attendance for the annual meeting and the luncheon this year. Usually they are. We always enjoy networking with Walworth County business leaders at this event. Kikkoman Foods started a bold experiment, and in the early 1970s, a Japanese company building a soy sauce production facility in the heart of the upper Midwest seemed like a reckless idea to many observers, even some within their own parent company. History proved the skeptics wrong. Our facility in Walworth has become the highest producing brewed soy sauce plant in the world, and it is the flagship plant for Kikkoman's 10 production facilities around the globe. Products from their Walworth facility are shipped to all 50 states, Canada, Mexico, and more than 20 countries overseas. And so he says, how was this accomplished? And he said, from the very beginning, our culture was built on a foundation of cooperation and trust between our company leaders and our plant employees. Early on, it was clear that Kikkoman Foods, that for Kikkoman Foods to become a success, we had to rely on each other. Of course, our parent company leaders brought soy sauce production expertise from Japan. However, while technical innovation is important, it is the people that make our company successful. It took the intelligent, hardworking, and dedicated local workers to turn potential into reality. Kikkoman's values include cooperation, holding each other accountable, showing appreciation, having mutual respect for each other, celebrating achievements, rallying together to face challenges, and always being community-minded. Our leaders trust that our employees will be there when the company needs them, and our employees know that the company will be there for them and for their families, even after the workday is done. As our first generation of employees is now reaching retirement age, our new challenge is to select younger workers and integrate them into our company culture. We're excited about the opportunity to utilize their energy and creativity to take our company to new heights during the next 50 years. In closing, we again offer our best regards to the attendees of today's meetings We wish you continued success in your own businesses and in our shared mission to promote economic growth and prosperity in Walworth County. Thank you to WCEDA staff, board, and member organizations for all that you do to make our county a great place to live, work, and Kikkoman Foods is proud to call Walworth County their home. So again, we'll deliver a plaque to them when the time is appropriate. And so our last part is always kind of a little bit sad for me because we usually recognize our outgoing board members. And so this year we have two. Bill Thompson. Bill and I met, I bet, at least 15 years ago probably. And again, when I was working at George Williams College and I think through the Music by the Lake program. Bill has just been really a great mentor here, and he's so plugged into the local economy and to agriculture. Really, Bill, it's just been a pleasure to work with you here, and I think you and I talked prior to this. I can't believe how quickly the 2-3-year terms went, the 6 years, but Bill did serve in a number of roles, you can see, but on our executive committee, including our president last year, and just really gonna miss you. I hope you're gonna stay in touch, Bill, and appreciate that. But if you could come up, have a little memento for you, and maybe we could get a picture. Thank you. Again, thank you so much, Bill, for your service. And then I mentioned Donna Walker as well before when I was talking about our Spotlight Park project. Donna wasn't able to be here, but again, really enjoyed working with her and with Alliant. It's been a great strategic partnership, and can't say enough good things about Donna and just her enthusiasm to help our communities and fight for our communities. So really appreciate her time, and we will definitely connect with her to get that to her. So maybe just and so in closing, I just again want to thank everybody for all that you do to help economic development. I see so many partners in the room. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to continuing to work with you to help make Walworth County a better place. We've got so many good things going for us that I think things are really optimistic for our future, but obviously have to continue to get through things, and I know, as Jenny mentioned, we don't know when this is going to end, but
Can I say something real quick?
oh sure, yeah.
Each table, there's a little round white circle under a chair, or on the side of the chair. Whoever has that chair can take some of these. Oh, wonderful.
All right, so again, thank you everybody for being here. Really appreciate all your support. Thank you to the sponsors. Have a good week.